Well, it's time now for our weekly Life Without Limits segment. This week's question: is art just a treasure for pleasure, or is it really a solid asset class? We're joined by leading contemporary art advisors, Michael and Nicolai Frahm. They work with artists and collectors from all over the world. Thank you to you both for coming here on City Central. Michael, let me start with you. How much more interest is there from the emerging markets? Because we saw that record for a French artist, but there's also so much now coming onto the markets for Chinese works of art, Russian works of art, which I guess just 10 years ago people didn't have the money to buy it.
Sure. I mean, I think this is the beginning of a market that is going to grow much bigger than what we can all imagine. The emerging markets have been playing a significant role in the last few years, but I still think there's a long way to go. So a lot of the Chinese contemporary artists now are commanding big dollars, but they're still nowhere near the Western big names. So I still think that there's huge amount of interest going into the market, and both on the buying side from emerging countries, but certainly also in terms of artists coming out of these regions.
Nicolai, the bids last night actually came through from Europe and US investors, which is quite interesting given the economic backdrop at the moment. Why, given what's going on in the world and the uncertainty that exists elsewhere, is there so much certainty here?
Because the art market seems to be the safest place.
Explain that.
Well, there are very few great artworks out there. Whenever a great artwork comes up, it does well. The demand is so high, people feel very safe going into this market. It's a very different market than what it used to be 5 or 10 years ago.
Nicolai, it's a market that you have to buy with your heart. I mean, in my head, I wish I were an art collector, but I just don't have the cash to. But I guess that if I did, I'd want to see something that I'd like to see in my wall, because otherwise, then if you lose money, you basically are not sure of making money. I mean, it's a very different investment to buying shares.
Sure.
So what kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to become a collector?
Well, you have to buy with your heart, that's one thing. But most people are not experts in this field, so you really have to do a lot of research, as you would buying into any other business or any other industry, and get great advice.
I look at a share price, I can analyze its price to equity ratio, I can look at its cash flow, I can understand the dynamic of the business, its consumers, its end markets, what's going on, what's going to happen next. How do I do that? What metrics can I look at and say, there's a piece of art that is going to generate a good return as well as being something that I love?
Well, the reality is that most probably you can't, because there's a very few people around the world who can actually do that. And it is, it's a different industry altogether when you look at the art market versus the equity markets, and you can't really compare it in the same way. Yeah, you can look at an artist's history on how he's done on auction, and you can look through past results, but you can't really compare it to equities. This is an emotional game, so you buy.
We were just talking about testosterone and the impact that has on making decisions. Is that relevant here?
Yeah, I think it is to a certain degree. You do have the concept of the trophy hunting aspect of buying something that nobody else can buy, and showing that maybe you do have that little bit extra than that other people don't have. So, but listen, when we look at a sale like Christie's, we've got to realize that what we're looking at here is the very high end of the market, right? So we're looking at the top 1% of the market, which is, by the way, generating around 70% of the overall global market, which is kind of interesting. But it is a market here, or a sale, that had great quality. So it's not all art that does great. It's the great quality pieces from renowned and established and important artists that will do great.
But so what kind of returns, Nicolai, would you be able to get, for example? I mean, there's some stuff that was sold, so you have all the Yves Klein, you also have the Basquiat. Are these pieces that will just increase in value every time they go out for auction? Because it's so rare to find these pieces out there.
Not every time, but probably a Basquiat like you saw yesterday, that could be $100 million in the next 10 years.
For Guy's birthday, there you go. I found what I'm giving you.
I'm looking forward to my birthday in 10 years' time. Is it possible, you talk about sort of what happened last time at auction and how you sort of track these guys. And is there a sort of glide path, a trajectory that these artists are on? Can you you can look at it and say, you know what, in 10 years' time these guys will be worth X? And how do you spot that early? How do you look at an artist early on? Because I guess if you're in making investment decisions, you want to get that as early in that trajectory as possible.
Sure. It's a combination of a few factors, I think. I mean, first and foremost, when Nicolai and I look at the artists that we advise our clients to buy, we look at how important are these artists going to be down the line in art history. How big of a role are they going to play? An artist like Ai Weiwei has dimensions that most other artists don't have because of his political activism, because of the big figure that he is. Is he going to be an important figure in the 21st century? It's going to be huge.
Because that's about him, not his art, though.
Well, it's a combination, because the art that he's creating is great as well, but he's bigger than just being an artist. He's so much more than that.
Yeah.
But it's just to kind of tell you that, you know, we look at different things, and in the end, when you want to spot an early artist coming out of, you know, of school, or just started to work with a renowned gallery, we look at something that excites us, and the only way that can excite us is by an artist who's doing something new that we haven't seen before. So, you know, you have to kind of play it in with the knowledge that you have of art history. Unless you have that knowledge, unless you understand what happened in the 50s and the 60s, it's difficult for...
It's all part of a narrative. It's fitting into that.
Yeah, but it's also how much does this artist have to work with? Does he have enough that 20 years from now he can still do something really interesting?
It's in for the long run. All right, Michael, Nicolai, thank you so much. Michael and Nicolai Frahm there.